Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is Great Big History Podcast. It's episode 5, Protective Leadership in the Ancient World. So, we talked about nomadic horse peoples. Nomadic peoples walking from place to place, looking for food. Those who will eventually domesticate horses will congregate or dominate the large steppe, the grasslands, the Great Plains that stretch from Eastern Europe all the way to northern China, Mongolia, Manchuria. They go 6, 7, 8,000 miles across. And so what happened is people who don't domesticate horses can't go there. They get pushed out. They have to settle somewhere else. They settle into zones, whether they are the forest zones of Europe and Russia, or what will become Russia, the mountain zones like Tibet. But they also settle in the river valleys, the mud flats of these great big rivers, and they begin cultivating food. They begin to settle. So it equals more food security, but it requires a lot of time to cultivate food. You have to basically work all year to get enough to feed yourself and your family. The people on the plains and the steppes began to domesticate horses, so they had more military power. They have more ability to find food. And they're going to be a great problem later on for settled people, because staying in one place is going to cause problems. Problem number 1. What if nomads need food? They know where settled peoples are. Settled people have no military skills. The farmers farm. They do not fight. We see this in of all places, Pixar's movie The Bug's Life. Like, who is going to stop the nomadic horse lords from killing people and taking their stuff? Problem number 2 is farmers are dependent on nature. They can't leave. They can't move. So they need the sun to shine, but not too much. They need the rivers to flood, the rain to fall, insects to eat the plants, but not too much. So who can negotiate with the gods? Who can command people to sacrifice, to give stuff up to the gods? You need somebody who can negotiate with those who control nature. People don't control nature. And so the idea is these superhumans must control nature. Problem number 3. What if people get into fights? People are always going to get into fights. Over whose land it is, over the price or the quality of goods, over whether restitution has to be paid, over the treatment of children and grandchildren, debts, wills, inheritance. As people get richer and start owning land, more money equals more problems. What if people start fighting with each other? So we have a series of problems, and who's going to solve those problems? Just the solving of the problems creates a problem. Who's going to do it? We need someone who's powerful, charismatic, and legitimate enough for people to listen to, but also rich enough to be able to have what could generously be called F-off money, so that they are respected by and not beholden to other rich guys. And have the money to get things done. Now, they're not going to spend all of their money to get things done. They're going to have to collect money. They're going to have to be powerful, charismatic, and legitimate enough to collect money from others. But they can't be beholden to others. And so what we get is the king, the Burger King. We get the king. The king is the solution. A rich guy capable of beating up other independent rich guys. A man, and yes, at the beginning, it is going to be a man, charismatic enough and powerful enough to make rich and poor people pay taxes. Why? Because he has to be able to convince farmers to labor for wages to build walls. It is walls that will defend us from the nomads. The nomads may be on horses, but horses can't climb walls. And nomads aren't going to get off their horses. If they get off their horses, they're just a regular guy. They're not scary anymore. They don't have that military advantage of being 8 feet up in the air, of moving at 20 miles an hour. But if you're going to build a wall, you can't farm your own land for food, which means you're not going to have enough food to feed yourself or your family. So they have to be paid, and they have to be paid enough that they can be convinced not to farm. That they can look at the money that they will be making and say, that's better than farming. So you need someone to be able to convince farmers to do that. They need to be able to collect enough money to do that. Then you need, this man also has to be capable of paying priests, building temples, putting on religious festivals. You have to keep the gods dancing and happy. You have to keep them happy. And that takes professional priests to read the signs and collect the data. You need temples for the priests to study and do their worshiping. You need to put on religious festivals. So you need to keep the gods happy. So someone has to be able to do all of these jobs. Notice they're all protective. Protect from nomads. Protect from nature. Protect from other rich guys. Success. Is a leader successful? They create cities. Their walls will create a city. They'll have farmland on the outside. They'll have an urban core. That population will grow. So the population grows from 1,000 to 5,000 to 25,000. And Urek, U-R-E-K, Urek, are 25,000 people large. The more people you have, the more taxes you collect, the society gets richer. The kings get richer. The rich get richer. That means you need more farmland, because you need more farmland to feed more people, which creates new problems. New problem number one. How do you get more farmland to feed more people? Because people are now living longer. More kids are surviving childhood. More food equals more health. So more people, you need more farmland. Problem number two, new problem number two is what to do about the income inequality. The growing population, the immigration, people coming in who say, oh, your city's great, I'll go there. The new diversity, all these people coming into your city who have all different traditions, different ways. Maybe they're nomads who want to settle. They're new technologies. And how do you deal with just people generally disliking each other or the changes? If you're going to do all these new technologies, new changes, new peoples, new growth, there's going to be plenty of people who say, oh, the old ways were better. So the solution to problem number one, the new problem number one, how do you get more land, is armies. You have to pay professional fighters, what we would call mercenaries, to go and take other people's stuff, to take their land. So you can't really take too many farmers off their farms without hurting the society. They don't make that much of a surplus. So you have to hire people who specifically are good at or want to be good at fighting. And these people have to do it for months. They have to be able to lay siege to cities and tear down their walls. They need to be able to go to a new place because you don't really care about the people are nice because you could keep them as slaves or enslave them and use them as workers, but you need the land. The land will create the food. The food will feed your city. So as your city gets bigger, you need more land. So your mercenaries need to capture and hold on to land. This is very different from nomads. Nomads didn't care about land at all. They cared about food. Now we care about land because the land will create the food. So this is very expensive. Armies are the most expensive thing humans will ever make. So as a king, as a leader, you have to get money. But if you win, you could take other people's money. You can make lots of money. We see this with Sargon. Sargon is the first man to conquer the world. He was a king in Akkad who built a mercenary army of 5,000 people, which was considered ginormous at the time. That's a city on the move. But how did he pay for that? Well, he paid for it by conquering other cities. So his army was so big, he had to keep conquering. He had to conquer the world in order to pay for his army. But what we get out of this is empire. Your people get money because you're going to conquer a new place. They can move in. They can settle. They can take the land. Or you're taking other people's money and you're distributing it to the mercenaries, to the people. You want people to be happy. So you keep 10%, but that 90% goes to everybody else. And that makes them happy. If I got a check for $25,000, I'd be pretty happy. Let the king do what he wants. Sounds good. So the people get money, they get land, we get empire, and that's Sargon. Sargon built an empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean Sea and encompassed every place but Egypt, which was so far across the desert, it wasn't part of the world. It's its own whole other thing. So this creates a new kind of leader. The military leader. Now, we're going to do a whole lecture on the military leader. But armies equaling success. If you can win, you can be legitimate. The problem to the second problem, what do you do with people who dislike all of these new immigrants, all of these new things, all of these new technologies? What do you do with the new technologies? What do you do when your city gets big? 25, 50, 250,000 people. Well, that's Hammurabi. Hammurabi is going to create the law code. And the law code is going to be written down. Very different from the nomads, where you had elders who knew the traditions. Now it's going to be written literally in stone. The king makes the rules. This is a new form of legitimacy. It's a new power that leaders have. The leader makes the rules. Now, what Hammurabi goes with is an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth. The idea was equal retribution if you're of the same social status. So if a nobleman punches out the front teeth of another nobleman, he loses his two front teeth. But the rich got softer punishments if they hurt the poor. So if a nobleman hurt a citizen and punched out his two front teeth, he'd have to pay a fine. He had money, so he's going to be punished, yes, but it's not an equality of retribution because they're not equals. The citizen is worth less, is below the nobility. So if a rich person punches out the front teeth of a poor person, he pays a fine, $500 a tooth. $1,000 a tooth. It's not nothing, but notice it's not equal. Likewise, it works in reverse. The poor get harsher punishments if they hurt the rich. So if a slave punches out the 2 front teeth of a nobleman, that slave is going to be put to death. That slave is going to be executed. Why? Because there are so many more poor people. There are so many more slaves, about 30% of the population. This poor citizens make up another 60% of the population. So you're 95 to 97% of the population is poor. And by poor, we mean also middle class today. We mean you could run out of money. When we talk about poor, we mean you could run out of money if you stop working. Rich people, on the other hand, will never run out of money no matter what they do. Their investments, their properties, their families, their savings, they will never run out of money. So what we have is a society that's extremely unequal. 97% of people are poor. They will at some point run out of money, or they are not even citizens. They don't even own their own body. Only 2 to 3%, maybe 5% at the top, are rich enough to be independent of kind of poverty. So you can't have the poor thinking they could hurt the rich, because if they think they could hurt the rich, they'll revolt. And if they can get away with revolting, they will murder the rich, take their money, and distribute it among all the people. So the king has to prevent that from happening. Because remember, the king is the richest of these guys, the most important of these guys. So if the king messes up this balance, if the law code does not protect the poor from the rich, but also protect the rich from the poor, you will have a massive revolt where numbers will overwhelm the rich. The poor numbers will simply overwhelm the rich, murder the rich, take their stuff, and distribute it. See the French Revolution, see the Russian Revolution. We'll talk about this at some point where we talk about revolutions. So we have a law code, but it applies to everyone. So that gave it fairness. Notice, there is no equality. There's no concept of equality. There's no concept that everybody in this society is the same. They're not. The word equality doesn't even exist in ancient Babylonian or Egyptian, as far as I know. So it applies, and so the rich are held to account, just like the poor. For the first time. It also protects women. But it does so by treating them as children. They are not responsible for their actions. See, if you're not responsible for your actions, then you can't be held responsible. Then you can't be punished. And that's a way of protecting children. We don't send 6-year-olds to prison. We don't call the cops on them. Even when they do bad things, when they lie, cheat, steal, we don't do it. Why? Because we don't consider them responsible. We may yell at their parents. We may even fine their dads, but we don't punish the children. And this is the idea that Hammurabi has. Women are going to be protected, and their status is going to be protected as a wife and a mother, not as a worker, not as a leader, but as a wife and a mother. So their world becomes more limited. To gain their protections, their world becomes limited. This also limits male behavior, but it limits female empowerment. Men can't do whatever they want to do anymore. There are rules that limit how men can treat women, how men can interact with women, how men can interact with their own lives. If they're a father, if they're a husband, there's things they have to do so that women can have their own lives. But what it also does is limit female empowerment. So notice what Hammurabi's doing. He's taking all these diverse people and he's giving them one law code. It's mine. It's the king's. The king makes the rules. But he's got a little bit for everybody. Look at how he divides up the society by wealth, by class, rich and poor, and also by gender. Male, female, children, another class. So he's dividing up people into categories and giving them protections, giving them responsibilities. Okay, in summary, the king gains new powers that a chief never had, that even the kings of early cities that are going to build walls never had, and that is emperor and lawgiver, a ruler over diverse people of different cultures, abilities, and histories. Also becomes the arbiter of fairness between rich and poor, men, women, farmers, merchants. Suddenly there's a whole lot of new responsibilities of keeping these different groups from all murdering each other. He becomes the protector of the people versus nomads, the employer-in-chief for public works. He's going to pay people to get stuff done. And he's going to employ people who can't, won't, don't want to farm. And there's plenty of people who don't want to farm. In fact, if you're listening to this, you're very likely one of those people. You're taking a college course to not be a farmer. In America, less than 5% of people are farmers. Most don't want to do it. It's too hard. So there were people back in the day who some would have to be bribed not to farm because if they didn't have the food, their family might starve. Other people say, oh, you want me to build a wall? Oh, I'll do that. Thank you. I'll take the money. He becomes paymaster and general-in-chief of the armies. He has to lead them, but he also has to pay them. He has to get the money up front. He has to guarantee the money. He has to promise them. He has to hire them. He becomes the quartermaster general to besieging forces. He has to supply food, goods, pay, clothes, medicine, entertainment. He becomes quartermaster. He has to be friend to the gods, supporter of the priests, keeper of the records, so that the priests can go back in time and know what the gods had wanted a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We do the same thing. We just do it with economics. The modern U.S. government keeps economic data the way that ancient kings kept religious data. How many goats were sacrificed? How many things happened? How much? Which were the bumper years with lots of crops? Which were the drought years? All of that is kept. And notice, it's kind of all economic data then. What worked, what didn't. The king becomes the maintainer of the markets, the chief diplomat for the merchant trade. So he has to do tariffs. He has to do trade alliances. He has to open up new markets to new cities because he's the only one with the money to get the wagons, to get the ships, to build the ships, he has to be a diplomat to all these other cities. And he has to be the keeper of peace within the city. Good equals success. The city survives. The city grows. The people get richer. Bad equals disaster. The city, the empire falls apart. It breaks into pieces. The people murder each other. There's a civil war. The family, the dynasty murders each other as they can't agree who's going to be in charge and have all of this power. So again, like with the nomadic chiefs, if it's good, you get to stay in charge for a long time. If you're bad, everything falls apart. Everything's a mess. All right, that's where we'll end. Thank you very much. Be safe. And that ends episode 5. So we're moving right along. Thank you.